Hello, and thank you for joining the Champion Within podcast, your premier go-to spot for unlocking your winning mindset. Whether you're an athlete looking to elevate your game to the next level, a coach leading the charge, an enthusiastic parent cheering from the sidelines, or an educator molding young minds, the Champion Within podcast episodes are packed with value, sharing the tools and strategies to unlock your potential and rise to new heights. Hosted by mentor, coach, and mindset leader Kate McCauley. Let's sit back and enjoy today's episode while discovering your champion within. And now, here's Kate.
Hey champions, welcome into the Champion Within podcast. Thanks for hanging out with us again. I'm your host, Kate McCauley. And if you're new here, you should know that I search for guests who will challenge you, inspire you, and help you to level up. My goal has always been for this podcast that you're going to learn something new, unlock a new mindset shift or a habit, maybe gain some leadership skills so that you can level up to become the best version of yourself. It's already within you, and we want you to own that. Today's guest is going to help you do just that and probably so much more. We get to hang out with Gerry Gribbon. He is an absolute game changer. After 28 years as an executive at Johnson & Johnson, he turned his passion for talent development into a purpose-driven mission. Gerry is a dynamic leader, a certified leadership coach, a sought-after speaker with decades of wisdom. He's a recognized expert in soft skills, or some people call them durable or human skills. We'll get into that. He is very passionate about delivering powerful talks that blend practical tools with energizing insight. Gerry brings unmatched experience in developing leaders, building personal brands, and inspiring cross-generational teams. From corporate boardrooms to high school audiences and college campuses, he delivers the information that we all need. And for those who have been around for a while, I did my stalking and he walks the walk. It's just not a bunch of talk here. We're going to talk about so many different things today, and I know you're going to level up. If you have not grabbed a pen or maybe open your notes in your phone, you're going to want to do that because I know you're going to be stealing some epic wisdom that he drops today. So let's dive in. Gerry, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm going to say that I'm probably at 8 out of 10 today. Excited to learn more about you.
Well, look, I appreciate you having me. That's quite an intro. I hope I can live up to it, but I'm happy to be here and look forward to our conversation.
Well, awesome. I can't wait for you to share. There's so many different directions that I would love to go into. I really would like for you just to start off. Tell us, the bio's awesome, but tell us, who is Gerry Gribbon?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I'm a retired professional. I spent 28 years at Johnson & Johnson in a variety of roles, as you mentioned, and then 12 years prior to that also in healthcare. So I spent my whole career in healthcare, much of it leading teams, leading people in different functional areas. I've always had a comfort on the stage. You know, when I was growing up around the dinner table, we never got the question, how was your day? Because then you could just say fine or good or whatever. My dad would always say, tell me 3 things you did today. What did you learn today? So we got pretty comfortable, you know, being orators early on in the Gribbon household. So I think my comfort in front of audiences always served me well on my career progression. And it also gave me the fuel to kind of focus on others. To, you know, the term servant leadership's been out there for a long time. And I think sometimes it's presumptive to say, well, I was a servant leader. But I found like my greatest energy came from helping other people become the best versions of themselves, which is something I hear you say on this podcast all the time. I retired from corporate life 2 years ago. And I also always kind of had like a little entrepreneurial itch. I started my own firm. As you mentioned in my intro, I do keynote speaking. I do some workshop development. I'm a certified coach through the International Coaching Federation. And so I'm sort of dabbling in a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but it's all designed to, to help my clients or the people that I work with be a little bit better tomorrow, maybe than they were today.
I love all of that. And we're going to pull a lot of that apart today. I'm going to go to something that you said. As I told you, and I tell all my guests, my listeners know, I do some stalking sometimes to figure out what we're going to talk about. And I just get some notes and then we let the conversation flow. So you mentioned that you retired 2 years ago and now you're in this new zone, which really just aligns well with what you did at Johnson & Johnson. And when I looked back at your retirement post, I did some deep diving into LinkedIn. I saw some really cool things. And then I went into the comments because I think that's really where it's at sometimes, that people say some things in there and it tells me about who the person was. So from your post, I want to steal that your son-in-law sent you a text after your retirement. I assume it was a dinner or a party, maybe?
It was a little reception at one of the J&J offices. Yeah, we kind of did low key.
Yeah, so very nice of them to do that. And I really love that you shared that he sent you a text later that night that said, what stood out is the people who chose to get up and speak and did not talk about goals you hit or awards you received or accomplishments you had. They spoke about the personal impact you had on them. I don't think many people can look back at their professional careers and see a trail of personal impact like you can. And, when I was looking in the comments, people were echoing this, how you were just great people. And I've heard you say on other podcasts, seen it on LinkedIn, and just little clips from you talking and speaking with groups, how kindness and people first, likability, and this was all over the comments, how you were that type of person. And I just want to ask you, did it come from that table where you had to talk about the good things from your day? Did this develop over time? Where do you think you gained really, I guess, this soft skill or human skill to be that type of person?
Well, first of all, let's admit that my son-in-law was probably trying to suck up for some goodwill. And quite frankly, as I recall, he probably got some. So thanks for pointing that out. Look, I don't know where. I think it comes from so many different places, right? I think it started with my mom and dad. My mom and dad were both in the healthcare field, so they both chose, I think, to take on professional roles that were, really focused on helping other people. My dad was a master's in social work, and my mother became an RN when I was I think 11 or 12 years old. So she had always had the dream to become a nurse, never went to college when she was younger. Her dad had passed when she was a teenager, and she didn't have the money for school. And my dad kind of said to her, well, like, what's stopping you? Like, go now. And she went to community college with a couple of her friends. And I can still remember being at her graduation where she wore her nursing cap and her whites. And I can remember being so proud of her. And I was probably 14 or 15 years old. So they,
really
they
cool.
both lived a life of service. And then I just think there's you build character, the people that you surround yourself with, the mentors in my life, other leaders that I learned from and watched. I remember really early in my career working for a gentleman who to this day is still a close friend and a close mentor, Anthony Shivo, in case he listens to this. And I remember one of the managers talking about someone on their team, and the comment they kind of made was, well, they've gone as far as they can go. And I remember Anthony sort of chastising the manager in a good way, but to say, look, you can't ever say that as a people leader. Your job is to help them go a little further, even if it's just incremental, even if tomorrow they're just a little better and they keep the same job forever. Your role has to be to help support them to get better and not stagnate. So, little moments like that, little stories that stick out, I think all kind of played a role. And then, look, I was at Johnson & Johnson for a long time. And like any company, there were things we needed to get better at. But we believed wholeheartedly in the importance of people, both the patients we serve, the professionals that we call on to use our products, and then one another as colleagues. And so I think the cumulative impact of all of those things, I hope, influence that. I will say, Kate, you mentioned, the LinkedIn post and the comments, and then I got a really nice booklet that included letters and emails and notes from people. And I mean, it was so humbling to look back, but it was a good reminder, right? People, and then I'm going to botch this saying, but people, there's a saying like, people won't remember what you did, but they'll remember how you made them feel, right? And
absolutely.
There were notes, there were emails, there were comments, many of which referenced an event, a conversation, something I said, something I did. And honestly, I didn't remember even a lot of them as I read it, but it was a great reminder because that individual remembered it and it was an impact. It lasted,
Mhm.
it stayed with them. So it was a beautiful, humbling, feel good moment for me as I wrapped up my corporate career to know that hopefully I was in the right place at the right time and that I did the right thing by people.
So many amazing stories all wrapped up in that answer there. I think you tied it together at the end when you received that booklet and some stories that you didn't even know impacted you. Just like I'm listening to you talk about your mom and how her resilience and seeing her go to college when she was an adult and your dad supporting that. And then Anthony just making that one little statement that stuck with you. As leaders, we don't know what lands and what doesn't land sometimes in those little moments. I'm sure you saw that in the well wishes for you for the next part of your journey. But I think it's important for everyone listening right now to realize that a mantra that you use, we're going to go right into this, words matter. And I've heard you say this in so many different places when I'm looking into what you do. Again, when I'm on LinkedIn, a colleague of yours followed up with not only do the words matter, but how you say them, the tone, how you make people feel. Because we can say something, just like someone could do personal development, read the book, do the thing, go on all the different programs and conferences. But if you're not going to take action and you're not going to say it, deliver it authentically, are you really even seeing growth and change? When you adopt this words matter as a mantra, what does that mean for you professionally and personally if it overlaps?
Well, I'm smiling because while my colleagues, I think, appreciated hearing it, my children, who are now all adults, and my wife probably heard it around the dinner table, too many times relating back. If my kids were here, they'd be going, "Words matter." Yeah, they'd be rolling their eyes.
Right.
And yet, all kidding aside, they've come back themselves now, all as professionals, to reference their own kind of experiences with it. But all those things matter, right? Like the message that you're trying to deliver, whether you're a speaker, a consultant, a manager, a people leader, whatever it might be, there's a couple things that really play into how effective it'll be. One is, and you mentioned it, tone, right? Voice inflection, volume, intent, and body language, and how you deliver. All those things matter, right? But the
Mm-hmm.
words that we choose, there's lots of other saying, right? Like words can sting, words can hurt, words can uplift. Like words are incredibly powerful when deployed the right way. And I am never the smartest guy in the room. I'm not the smartest person on this podcast. I have so much still to learn, but I've always had an appreciation for language and the power of language. And when you hear a great, orator deliver a message, many times it's the message is secondary to how powerful they can deliver it. What emotion can they evoke in you? Can they inspire you to take action or to be reflective or whatever? So for me, the power of word choice is really, really critical. And I think it's so easy nowadays to just kind of blurt out whatever we're thinking or be ready to
Mm.
respond and say something when the other person's lips stop moving. But then are we really listening and are we being really thoughtful? So, and too many words matter too. So I'm going to stop right there because that's a lot of words to answer that question.
Well, I think it's really a great message all around, and all of those things contribute to words matter. Your body language, the way you deliver it. We're going to move in a direction related to delivery, receiving feedback, giving feedback. Before I even get there, I think it's important that we dive into what are these soft skills, because some people are probably thinking, all right, Kate, what is this soft skills, durable skills, human skills? We're talking a little bit about it already, but I would love for you to share what you think soft skills are so that, anyone who's listening could put that uniquely into their life.
Yeah, so if I can, let me preface the answer to your question with a little context. I'm going to date myself here a little bit as well, but in the late 80s, I think, maybe late 80s, early 90s, author and consultant Tom Peters, who's published, I think, 15 or 20 books on leadership and excellence, wrote an article in which he touched upon the concept of personal brands for,
Mm.
for the first time, right? Like I had not heard this concept when I read this article. And basically, he had a pretty famous quote in this article, which said in a nutshell that we all have to be CEOs of the brand called you, right? And the article went on to describe how each of us have professional and personal attributes and people's perceptions based on their experiences with us, just like a brand has those same things. So I got pretty interested as a young professional in this concept of personal branding and recognizing that every interaction with other people has an impact on my brand, right? And it doesn't matter what I say my brand is. You will decide based on interacting with me what you think my brand is, right? And hopefully we interact and come to a place where the perceptions are at least close, right? And so when I went out and got to lead teams and do a little bit of work with younger professionals who were like aspiring to be in leadership and management positions, I used some of these principles to kind of help them understand this importance, right? I always call them moments of truth, right? When you interact with anyone in your life, there's only three things that can happen to your personal brand. If they already know you, you can either have an interaction with them that exceeds their expectations of you, and they go, wow, like, I never expected that from Gerry, but that's really great insight. So, maybe your brand improves a little bit. Or in most cases, we deliver exactly what others expect of us. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of what I thought I would get. And their perception of my brand is what it is. Or, those moments where we all are having a bad day or a faux pas or a bad moment and we hurt our brands, right? It's only those three things that can happen. I started to dig in, a little bit deeper. And look, the reality is that much of our brand, our personal brand, is determined by these interpersonal interactions, these interpersonal skills, right? Do we do what we say we're going to do? Are we good teammates? Are we good collaborators? Do we have good character? Do we conduct ourselves in an ethical manner? Do we have empathy? All of these factors. And interestingly, over time, the concept of soft skills has started to be recognized as a critical part of our professional and our personal success. The reason they were called soft skills in the early days was actually because it was a purposeful deprioritization of those skills, right? So what was believed then was it's the technical skills, it's the degree that you get, that's what drives your success. And, being nice to people or being a good teammate doesn't really matter. So they were called soft with the inference that soft is less important. I think if you talk to any business professional today, and there's all kinds of research and all kinds of articles, soft skills are now not a nice to have. They're an absolute critical success factor. And I suspect we'll talk about some other things related to that. But for me, I started to really get interested then in this phenomenon of soft skills becoming more and more respected, more and more sought after. I had the privilege of interviewing and hiring a lot of people in my professional career. And, we started to even shift what we were looking for in that 1 hour together. It was less about...
I'm going to jump in. What did you look for?
Well, listen, historically, we all have a resume. You send your resume in, you'd look at what job experiences, where'd they work, what'd they do, what was the title. If it matched up closely with what you were looking for, you'd say, well, tell me about what you did in that job and that job. And it became the foundation. And don't get me wrong, that stuff's still important. What you hear a lot of people looking at now is more about what's the interaction like with this individual? What are their interests outside of their job? How do they interact with colleagues? Tell me about your dynamics on a team. Tell me about a time when somebody wasn't carrying their weight. How did you respond to that? Were you able to do that in a constructive way, or did you, take a weak relationship into strength? All of those interactive skill sets have become more and more important. Then I dug into a lot of the research, and I'll come up for air here, but I think what we'll talk a little bit about today is there's a soft skills gap in the workforce today. It's significant. And it's
Mm-hmm.
especially an issue for young professionals who are coming out of school, entering the workforce. They've got their degree, they had their major, they got their 120 credits, whatever it was.
Right.
But they're walking into the professional setting, and in most cases, they're not meeting the expectations their employers have for, how to play nicely with others, right? To kind of
Sure.
put up.
I have a unique perspective on this right now, being an educator, of course, but also I have a son who's in college now, a daughter who's getting ready to go to college. And I've been able to ask them. I always tell them about who I'm interviewing. And a lot of times, like you said, your kids sometimes will roll their eyes. They're like, great, you're interviewing this person. So now we have to tell you what we think we would want to ask this person.
Hey, whatever you say, don't say words matter at the dinner table tonight. Huh? I want them to kind of like this episode.
You know what? I do. My kids will tell you that I do steal things from my podcast interviews and they become a part of my talks, as they say. They're like, you're a talker. It makes sense. I wouldn't be surprised if you meet them someday. They're like, you're the words matter guy. So, get ready for that. They'll be polite to you and roll their eyes at me. So I asked my son, I said, I'm having this podcast interview today and I'm curious. I asked him a couple scenario type questions. He's considering being a teacher. He was considering business. I said to him, what would you do in situations if a student was doing something and you had to make a phone call home to that parent because the kid did something crazy and you had to address it? The kid got a consequence. You had to call home. And then the parent said back to you, well, what did you do to cause this issue? And he looked at me like, wait, what? I said, they're not going to be agreeable with you. How are you going to deal with this? And he said, oh, well, I guess I would just say the facts. He's like, but I'm going to admit sometimes my mind does go blank. If I can talk about basketball or things that I know, then I can talk. I'm curious, when you're saying employers are seeing that they just don't have these soft skills, there is a gap, whether it's COVID or AI or video games, we're in the basement too much, whatever the combination of all of those things might be causing this gap. Do you have a story or an example or maybe a research study that is showing what employers are seeing? He and I talked through it and he had some great ideas about what he could say. And he actually mentioned, well, maybe they should weave this in and teach us a little bit. He's just a freshman now, so I'm hoping they do. But do you have anything like that, either from your time at Johnson & Johnson or a research study that you could say, well, this is what people are seeing and this is a problem?
Yeah, well, first of all, there's a lot of research out there, right? And I can reference a couple of those key studies. So that's one thing. Second thing is there is also a fair amount of media coverage that's been dedicated to this gap. One headline that I recall was college students believe they're ready for workforce, but employers aren't so sure, right? And then the article went on to reference one of these studies that we're talking about. The number that I quote in my keynotes, when surveyed, fewer than 4 in 10 employers believed that their college hires were well prepared for the workforce. And then when you dig a little bit deeper into that, it's not that they weren't prepared with their major, because regardless of their major, employers were getting what they expected for a college graduate with no work experience, right? If you're an accounting major, you understand debits and credits. If you're an education major, you know how to do a lesson plan. If you're a nursing major, you understand basic physiology and biology, et cetera. So it wasn't that part of their job. Employers knew, hey, listen, we've got to kind of teach them how we do things here, but they had that foundation. What they didn't have was strong communication skills, writing or oral skills. They were not necessarily good collaborators. Critical thinking is a huge issue because what does everybody want to do when they don't know the answer? You just go to the phone and you look it up. Well,
right.
You and I both know you can't do that in a meeting in the workplace. Like,
right.
You gotta at least know how to approach where will we find these answers, etc. And there's a whole long list of these skills. Bottom line is that for quite a while, most colleges and universities were focused almost solely on this technical or degree focused curriculum. And yeah, they all had career centers and they would help you build your resume and maybe get ready for an interview, but they really weren't teaching these kids the importance of their soft skills inventory or their interpersonal skill set and the impact that it would have. There's a great saying out there, and there's different variations on it. So the positive one is hard skills or technical skills get you hired. Soft skills get you promoted.
I love that.
The harsher version of that is hard skills get you hired, soft skills get you fired. Meaning that if you don't have them, you're not going to last. And in fact, one of the studies, I think 89% of professional recruiters state that when a placement fails, it's usually because of a soft skills gap. Again, the recruiters are saying, we're really good at finding the experts around the technical job you're trying to fill, but sometimes when they get there, they're not showing up with this interpersonal inventory that was expected. I talk a little bit in my keynotes about the future of work. And there are lots of people speaking of the future of work. Usually it's related to technology, or in some cases, like coming out of the pandemic, it's where will work occur? Will it be remote? Will it be in the office? How many days a week? For me, my premise is whether you're in the office or on the beach or remote or on Zoom or whatever, if you lack these skills, you're going to be in trouble.
What do championship teams, standout students, and elite companies all have in common? A trained mindset. The Champion Within programs aren't fluff. They're mental performance blueprints that build focus, resilience, confidence, and clarity when it counts. Now is the time to set this up. Not next season, not next quarter, now, when the pressure is real and the habits are forming. Whether you're on the field, the courts, in the classroom, or leading a boardroom, your people need transformation and mindset training. Let's partner. Let's co-create this. Let's build the mindset that fuels the next level. Schedule a quick call. Just go to the show notes after the podcast and use the link. Let's design the exact experience your people need because they already have the talent. Now we build the belief. Yeah, absolutely. There's so many different groups of people that can impact a person. Just as you had mentioned, your mom, there's different mentors, even just your interaction with your colleagues at Johnson & Johnson. For me, same. So many people in my life have impacted my journey. I'm thinking of a couple different groups, and I want to jump to all of them really, but I'm going to go one by one here. If we're thinking about parents, because parents should be concerned that your kids don't have these skills. And they have to learn some things on their own. I don't want to encourage, that you're doing everything for them. But if you could pick one soft skill that a parent could start fostering at home with their kids. I always say age 12 is when you should start encouraging your kids to send the email, talk to the coach because of research, lots of different things. But is there a soft skill that you would recommend? This is something that you could start at home. And how do they do this in a way that it'll make a difference?
Listen, I think it's really hard to pick one, but if you're putting me on the spot, I'm going to start with the very basic one of communication, right? You got to be able to look people in the eye. You got to be able to communicate effectively with your voice, but you also have to be able to sit down at a keyboard and effectively write whatever you want to communicate about as well. And the fact of the matter is, you mentioned it earlier. Having raised 3 children, I know the way that they would communicate often too was like looking down at the phone and they're typing, and the house phone would never ring because it's like, my friends aren't going to call. We're just going to text and whatever. And that's great. We all text too, but when you get into a professional setting, that's not the way you communicate, right? You've got to be able to, and sometimes you got to be put on the spot and get up in front of a room full of people and state your belief or explain an answer to to somebody above you, etc. So I would say probably start with that. I taught my kids from the time they were young what I call give them 7. And that was when you meet somebody new, look them in the eye put your 5 fingers out and give them a firm handshake and introduce yourself. And, again, I got more than a few eye
I love
rolls.
that tip.
I got more than a few eye rolls from them back then as well. And you know what? And this is a true story. All 3 of them went away to college. And within the first few weeks, called me back and said, Dad, you're not going to believe this, but I had a professor or an administrator or someone that I met today compliment me on how professional my handshake was.
As I said, I knew people were going to steal stuff from you today. So now my kids are going to be like, so he's the words guy and the give them 7 guy. What a great thing for parents to do, because of course you're going to get the eye rolls. It would be developmentally strange if your kids were like, teach me how to do this so I can be successful in work. That is not going to happen at your dinner table. This is for my listeners. You know this, of course, Gerry, but that's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. If it does, you actually should probably talk to someone else. Something's going on here and they're trying to hide something else. I think that is great. And when they roll their eyes at you, just know that they are listening. They did at least hear it because you got a reaction. They rolled their eyes. And if you make them give you 7 when you're going to wherever, out to eat somewhere, this is a way for them to start learning that in an environment that they feel comfortable. The reason why they roll their eyes at us is because they feel comfortable with us. My mom will always say things like, everyone said they were so great at school, best kids ever. She'd be like, okay, wait till you see them at our house. But we want them to be like that. And I feel the same way about my kids, that when they go out into the world, you better act the way I'm teaching you how to act and not the way you act here, but they're comfortable here. I'm going to jump to another group because you mentioned so many different people. Let's talk about coaches here, because I have some that listen. I get to work with athletes. I know you've worked with athletes talking about these different skills and how really it transfers over to future work. Let's shift it to, how can a coach look at a loss situation and teach some sort of human, durable, soft skill there? How can they reframe that for their athletes? Because it's real easy for us to sit in this and think all of the problems, but do you have any tips there?
Well, I mean, listen, as a dad of 3 kids who played a variety of sports growing up, they played rec ball and travel ball and some club stuff in college even. Listen, we don't win all the time. So I think the earlier athletes are taught how to lose with grace and with good sportsmanship. I'm always a fan of that. I know there are some coaches that are, don't accept losing. And look, I'm all for the competitive spirit of let's go out, play the game fairly, and leave it all on the field.
Sure, we want to win.
Yeah, and even when you do that, though,
right.
Sometimes you don't win. And look, I think if you're talking about rec ball,
sure.
I mean, that's the earliest stage where most kids learn about teamwork, about coachability, right? Mm-hmm. Because these coaches are trying to help them make their games better. When I talk to young athletes, high school, college, coachability is one of the things that I tell them, look, you're already going to be good at this soft skill because you're coached as an athlete. When you move into your professional world, unless you start your own business, every one of you are going to have a boss someday, and they're going to coach your performance. Mm-hmm. And if you are open to that and you really listen to understand what are the things you could get better at, you'll be well served. Teaching those athletes how to take feedback, how to not personalize it, but to know that it's for the good of the game, the good of their skill set, I think really critical. And how to be good sportsmen and good sportswomen all the time, always. That plays into your character, plays into empathy, it plays into how you treat other people. So that's the thing that I always look for in the people.
So many things for you to learn from that. We think sometimes that, we have to win. Of course you want to win, like we were just saying, but you actually can learn a lot from a loss, a lot more sometimes. And that coachability piece that you just mentioned is incredibly important, not just in athletics, but in all areas of life. I know that you touch upon this sometimes when you go out and talk, and I've seen it in different posts that you share, that people need to give feedback. If you don't get a job, for example, and you need to be willing to ask for it and receive it. I like to say that feedback is a gift. Sometimes it comes wrapped in a pretty bow. Sometimes it's a hot mess and thrown in a Target bag and they forgot to grab it, but they got it on the way to the party type of thing. but there's something in there for you if you're willing to understand that this is a gift here. And even though it might not be delivered perfectly, you can learn from it. Do you have any tips for not just a coach or a parent, but people in general for giving and receiving that feedback?
Well, listen, there's been so much, out there about giving feedback, right? So many different methods, sandwich method, and you're really good at this, but you need to get better at that so you can be good at this. Like that's probably the most commonly used approach. If I'm the recipient of coaching, I always want actionable feedback. And this is an example that I saw from multiple lenses in my career. When someone goes for a promotion and they don't get it, right? And oftentimes, if the hiring manager wasn't comfortable giving feedback, they'd say, "Oh, Kate, you did awesome in the interview. You were so good, but we're going to give the job to Mary," right? And you're kind of like, well, if I did so good,
Right.
like, how can that be, right? And so I always would tell my people, like, in that
Right.
moment, you got to ask them for actionable feedback. What was it that the person you're hiring did, better than I did so that I can work on this? Or where was there a gap or a shortfall? And it's funny, a lot of people have a hard time giving that because they just aren't comfortable,
Yeah.
or they view it as confrontational or whatever. On the other end of it, again, I would tell the people that worked for me that were hiring others, listen, for anybody that you're not going to hire, you've got to help them understand why that was and give them some direction on things they can work on to be a better candidate the next time.
It's a two-way street. I got to say, as an educator, we got so much feedback asked and, unsolicited feedback from administrators, from parents, and we had to take it, and be professional about it. I think that educators have this unique place where we're able to teach other people how to give and receive feedback. And I have seen, actually, in the corporate space mostly, that people who are pretty high up there who I've worked with say, well, I don't want to say that to someone. I don't want to hurt their feelings. And I explain, you're doing them a disservice because they want to do a good job. If you want them to do well in your company, even if it's not working for you, you should give them feedback. But you're right that they, at least my experience recently when I'm in this role, they're very uncomfortable. It's almost surprising to me because I view them as being very successful people. And I'm surprised because I think, didn't you have to receive and give feedback to get here? But I guess they just feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, I'm surprised, but I do think it comes to a fundamental discomfort, viewing it as a confrontation when it really doesn't have to be viewed that way, right? One of the things that I learned over time, and I started to do, mid-career later, when I would have a team of people working for me, or when I'd hire someone new into the team, I would always sit with them and ask them, how do you like to be coached? What will be the best way? And so for some of them, it's like, I never want you to coach me in front of the team. Like if I do something wrong, which again, would be just good practice. You wouldn't want to coach someone in front of others, but it allowed them the feeling that, hey, I'm going to work with my boss to sort of set some parameters, some boundaries, how we do this. And then what that did was it left them open. As long as I respected, what mattered to them, we could have good conversations. The other thing that I always like to talk about, there's a great concept called feed forward. And it's actually a chapter in a best-selling business book by Marshall Goldsmith called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And I had the good fortune to hear Marshall speak at a meeting some years ago. And so the premise is so simple, but it's brilliant, right? When we get feedback, it's typically on an event that's already occurred. And it's something that whoever's giving it to us wants something done differently the next time, or maybe you made a mistake. It wasn't. And the problem with that is, right, we can't change it. It's over. So most of us get feedback and we walk away sort of beating ourselves up like, I wish I could have that moment back. Marshall's premise is give people feed forward. So whatever it was that you want them to get better at because of something that already happened, put it in a future tense, like, Kate, nice job today. The next time you're presenting, I'd really like you to think about proofreading everything strongly so that there are no typos, etc. Now, Kate's a smart person. She may go, uh-oh, I better go back and look. Maybe I had some typos. But the feeling in that moment is you're not being dressed down for that. You're just being told, let's tighten this up next time to be sure. And I love that premise. I love, when possible, putting things in a future tense. It's not always
Right.
possible. If there's, some issues require acknowledgement and addressing them fairly soon after, but for the most part, a lot of developmental things can be put in a forward thinking framework.
And then you have to be willing to take it. That's a growth model, a growth mindset. You have to be open and willing. And that's the part that you and I both teach. It's really something that has to be taught for many people. I think it's surprising to me because it's something that I do on a regular basis, but many people just don't have this skill to do that and they feel uncomfortable. But the good news is you can change your brain. You can change how you show up in the world, and it takes practice. It's not magic beans. Speaking of that, I do like to always say, and we could talk forever. I might have to have you on again here on the show. I really want to go to this space because I bring it most of my guests here. We talked about all of the success and this is what I would do. This is what I would do. A lot of times people say to me, oh, this is so brave of you to leave teaching and then go do this. And I'd like to make sure that people know there are setbacks, there are failures. I'm wondering, Gerry, if you'd be willing to share something that maybe didn't go so well for you. And how did you navigate through that? What did you learn?
You might have to have me back several times to talk about maybe things that didn't go well or mistakes that I made. Look, I think I know that when I walked out of corporate life to retire from that phase and enter this one, that I was a much better people leader than I was early in my career. I think I learned sometimes through the hard way, and maybe this is partially where words matter as well, that while my intent was always pure and always had the other person's best interests at heart, I learned later on it didn't always land that way for some of them, right? And so I learned how to modify, and that's where I evolved into questions like, how do you like to be coached, right? Oftentimes I would say, how do you think that meeting went? And it's funny, Kate, right? You're right. You have to be open to getting some coaching, but more often than not, if you came out of a bad meeting and you said to the colleague that was kind of running it, how do you think that went? More often than not, they go, oh, that didn't go well. So now I don't have to tell you that didn't go well. Yeah, look, I think we could have done better. Let's figure out what do we want to do next time, and now you're aligned. And I think some of that just comes with practice and learning. But I know that I learned to deliver those messages in a much more impactful and yet maybe empathetic way, where the recipient, ultimately believed that I had their best interests at heart.
So, Gerry, everything isn't always sunshine and rainbows. I like to make sure that we mention that. Is there a time where you can think that either you received feedback or maybe you gave someone feedback, maybe at J&J, personal, professional, and it really landed well, you learned from it or they learned from it? Maybe a story you could share?
Yeah, I think I referenced earlier today the importance of giving people fair and actionable feedback. And so I saw early on, and we talked about it earlier, right? The discomfort that people had in sort of providing that. And so I made a personal vow that anytime I was interviewing to fill a position, and I had internal candidates that were not ultimately selected, that I was going to give them honest feedback and also give them suggestions on, how they could improve, what they could do to get better. I actually have had people reach out to me after I told them that they weren't getting the job that they were going for, but I gave them this feedback and actually say thank you and tell me that the specificity of the feedback I gave them was better than they would typically get even in a performance discussion with, whoever they were working for. And it wasn't always easy because, again, think about this. You're calling someone sort of crush their dream in the moment. Like, hey, that job you interviewed, you're not going to get it. I always tried to do that with sensitivity and empathy and encouragement, but also kind of explain to them where did they fall a little bit short. And then, hey, here's some ideas for how you may want to work on that. And then I also always made the offer, hey, when you start to do some of these things, get back on my calendar in 90 days. Check in with me. Let me know how you're doing. I'll give you any suggestions that I can. I don't have all the answers. Nobody does. People tended to appreciate that opportunity. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, I know toward the end of my career, I was a much better manager than I was early on. I mean, you learn these lessons, you go through, successes and failures. I always used to tell my team, more people will watch you in a moment of failure or in a moment of disappointment than will watch you in a moment of triumph, right? How are you going to react? Are you going to keep your head held high? Are you going to own it? Are you going to be accountable? Are you going to learn from it, etc.? So, look, I, like everybody, had plenty of those moments across the tenure of my career there, but I always tried to walk away from those moments learning something and asking myself, how will I do that differently the next time to be better? And, I was in an environment where we nurtured one another. We believed in talent development. And I also worked with great, great people, fortunately, many of whom invested in me as well, that would come and give me that feedback that I needed and just say, hey, listen, you may want to think about this a little differently. As we talked about earlier, coachability is just so critical.
So important. There's so many times when I've worked with people and they focus on something that's going wrong right now. And really, if you can focus on what can I do to get better tomorrow, that's really the sweet spot. And that's where you see growth. Can you think of a story where somebody came back to you and said, you know what, I didn't really love that feedback that I received from you, but in reflection now, it really is something that I valued, and maybe it stung in the moment, and maybe I didn't even take it so well, or maybe they did. Almost a full circle moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it happens, more often than you think, right? Because again, when we get feedback, sometimes we're wounded by it, right? Like, I thought I did that well, or whatever. So I have a couple. I guess the one that jumps to mind, I had a team of managers working for me, and I had a fairly new manager who was filled with aspirations for their career and full of self-confidence, and not always open to coaching or feedback or feed forward, right? And it was a challenge. It was a challenge for the dynamic between this individual and myself. And when I would provide suggestions, coaching ideas, etc., I got met with a lot of resistance. And after a while, the individual decided to move on. And of course, in the moment, I sort of questioned myself, like, am I giving this person my best? And is there something I'm doing to contribute to this? But I really believed like I was giving them feedback that would help in their development. And they believed they were going to go on and, run a company someday, which again, I love that kind of passion and aspiration,
Right.
but they needed to get better at a lot of things. Anyway, fast forward a couple of years go by, literally, and one day my cell phone rings, and it's this person in my phone, and I had not talked to them in a long, long time. And I, honestly kind of looked at it like, wonder what they want.
Right. Am I going to answer this?
Yeah, it's kind of like, does it just go to voicemail or not? But I picked
Right.
up. I picked up, and we exchanged pleasantries and how you been and how's your family. And then this individual said, "Look, I'm calling you to say I'm sorry, to apologize." And so I was definitely caught off guard. I said, "For what?" And they said, "When you were my manager, I wasn't really open to feedback and to coaching. I really thought I kind of had it all together." And I sort of, poo-pooed some of the things that you were bringing to me, and I know that I was really difficult to deal with. And I'm calling to let you know that I've grown up and I've matured, and I'm sorry about that. And as it turned out, we went on to have a conversation. This person was going through a divorce, and I guess in one of their, conversations, battles, whatever you want to call it, with their spouse kind of said to them, all these issues that we're talking about, some of these are the things that your old boss tried to talk to you about and you just shut it down over and over again.
Wow.
So, I wasn't happy to hear that this person went through this
Sure.
turmoil, but I was happy for them that they had sort of come to this realization around some things that maybe they needed to address and look at differently. And I'd be lying if I didn't say there was a little bit of, um, redemption's probably the wrong word, but I kind of felt good about, yeah, like, that I was giving this person my best at the time. And I felt good looking back on that after this phone call. So, it took a lot of courage for that person to pick up the phone and a lot of growth,
Right.
and that made me happy for them. But yeah, I mean, there's no shortage of people that come back and go, you know what, in the moment, not sure that I took this the right way, but now that I've thought about it, hey, will you help me on this journey? And, I'm always willing to help. So,
What a great moment of growth. And, you had said that person needed to do some work to become a better leader. I think that's a sign of true leadership when you can own, I really didn't do what I should have done back then. And coming to you, they didn't need to do that. They could have just reflected themselves and say, my spouse is right. This is actually aligned with what I've been told for years. But to say that to you is pretty, I don't even know what I want to call it. I guess growth is the best word for it. And it's pretty cool for them to do that. For you to say, okay, it wasn't me. I don't know. I just think that that's a good full circle moment that you're
yeah, I
thinking,
mean,
all right,
listen, we all replay in our head,
right,
past scenes. What should I have done differently? And so this was a relationship that wasn't my strongest, and I
sure,
have to own my part of that as well. But there was a certain satisfaction in this person recognizing, hey, you really
right.
were about helping me, and I just was resistant to it then. And again, I appreciated that call. We've
Mhm.
talked maybe once or twice in the years since, so it's not like it was a rebirth of this relationship. It was
Right.
just a call, and I don't know what they were going through that prompted that. Maybe they were going
Who
through
knows?
multiple calls like that. But in any event, the point is, I think if you're going to be a good coach and a good manager and a good leader,
Hmm.
you're going to have to give people a little bit of room to internalize the feedback or the feed forward that you're giving them and let them kind of process it, right? And it doesn't always go well initially, but most people will value it. And like I said earlier, some of those people will reach out later to go, you know what, that was great feedback and I appreciate it. And, will you help me? And I think as
Yeah.
good leaders, we've got to give them a little bit of room to kind of get to that point.
Yeah. I love that happened for you and for them. It's pretty cool. But I don't want to keep you forever. I think we really could talk forever. There's so many different things about what you teach now, your experience and journey at Johnson and Johnson, the different people that you have been able to guide during that time in your career and now what you do. Before I let you go, I do need to ask, why did you decide to go out and start talking to people and sharing about these soft skills, durable human skills, whatever people want to call them? They're much needed. Why is this something that pulls on your heartstrings you find so important?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think part of it was my own deep dive into some of the research and some of the data, right? So I think we all experience these soft skill gaps in our own lives day to day, both professionally and even, personally, et cetera. But when I started to look at the data and the quantifying of the gap and the fact that the gap continues to get bigger, not smaller, it's really interesting. There's a data point that I share when I do my keynotes, and it's a research study that was done by Stanford, Harvard University, and the Carnegie Foundation, I think it is. And basically, the study can be described in a pyramid. The pyramid has a 15% cone at the top, and the bulk of the pyramid is 85%. And the conclusion of this research was that our professional success, 15% of it is only attributable to our technical skills. So
Mm,
whatever your degree's in, whatever your professional path, 85% of it comes from our soft skills. Now, what's incredible about this study and I tee this up when I have audiences, it was done in 1918.
Oh, wow.
So it's 107 years old. And so I like to tell people this soft skills thing's not new. This has been going on for a really long time. And yet, 100 years ago, researchers understood that these soft skills were far more important than the marketplace was ready to absorb. So, back to your question, I think when I've seen data points like that, and I realize how long this gap has gone on, that's one motivation. The other is we see the gap magnified in those early career professionals, right? So young men and women that are coming out of school, coming out of college, into the workforce, and I started to think, man, I think there's an opportunity here to target this group to try to help them see, and again, they respond to data, this group, right? So we can get up and we can talk about all of these. You got to have empathy, you got to be a good communicator, and they're gonna yawn and fall asleep. But when
Right.
you start to show them, hey, you just invested 4 years of your life and a lot of money to get a degree, and 6 out of 10 employers are going to tell you that you're not meeting their expectations. Like, that's an issue. And I could see it when I'm at a college session. You can sort of see the kids sit up
They
and like
lean. Yeah, they
start to
lean forward.
engage and like, yeah, like maybe I need to pay attention to this, right? And so I just felt like it was a great way to make a difference.
Sure.
I'm a certified coach. I do work with corporations. I do work with professional associations and with
Mhm.
individuals. So I don't want you to think that I only work with this audience.
Right.
But
You just, yeah.
that's what motivated me was, man, where can I make a difference? Like, where can I go to a group that doesn't have an infrastructure or a developmental structure beyond their school? And when they step out, like, what are they going to do to get that help? And I think, it was those combination of factors that I think led me down this path. Again, doing a lot of work with professionals as well. And that's the other interesting thing, right? Soft skills are sort of lacking everywhere. I think we've all
Mhm.
become a little bit tainted by technology, by the ease of using our phone
A
to
little
interact.
bit. I think it's really everywhere with AI and
I was just going to say the same
honestly,
thing. Yep.
Gerry, honestly, I'm sitting here, those who are listening to the audio version of this, and I'm nodding my head because all of the work I do, I'm very grateful to be able to also work in a lot of different spaces. And what you do with personal brand, I mean, young people get it that, this is your personal brand. They get that with the age of social media and, technology, AI. But we need this, not just in the high school and college space, but everyone needs this. So thank goodness you are doing it every space. I'm sitting here thinking, my goodness, we could do a whole series just on these different things. Who knows?
Yeah, no,
I'm not.
you mentioned AI. I'm glad you did, right? Because, um, in a world of AI, and we've only got a thimble full of AI so far, right? Like, where this is going to be in
Right.
10 years is going to be unbelievable. But
Right.
I tell my young audiences all the time, there are plenty of things AI cannot and will never be able to do, right?
Sure.
Um, and so what will be the differentiator? And by the way, will AI take jobs? Probably. It will probably eliminate some things, right?
Mhm.
But to me, it makes your soft skills inventory, your ability to relate, your ability to emote feelings and make others feel something, right? Inspired, moved, happy, energized, whatever it is, right? That's going to be the differentiator between which group of people employers say, yeah, you're ready to be a leader in my company versus which ones are not. And
Right.
I think that, quite frankly, I think soft skills have never, ever been more important than they are now in a world where artificial everything is kind of creeping into our professional and
Yeah,
personal.
you're going to be able to stand out if you are that person who has those strong soft skills.
Yeah, listen, I always
Oh,
ask,
Gary,
I
I could
always ask,
keep you forever. I don't want to keep you forever. You
no, but
get
look, I
ready. I
always,
may have to.
everything you say drives another thought, right? So, just one quick
Right.
thought. To your point about fitting in, I always challenge my young audiences. Do you want to fit in or do you want to stand out? And the
Right.
reality is you have to do both, right? You have to fit into a culture. You have to fit into
Great point.
an organization, make sure it's a good fit for you and for them. But you have to find ways then to stand out. And the ways
Mm.
that you want to stand out are in positive or exceptional ways, not in gaps or shortcomings, right? I mean, we all have to get better, but fitting in and standing out are not mutually exclusive. They're actually very aligned.
I love all of this, and it's so aligned with everything that I do. You might have to be someone that comes back more often. We'll see. So, how can people get in touch with you? Not only for the work you do, and we just really touch the surface on what you do, but really to bring you in the corporate space, universities, wherever people need you. Where can they reach out and get in touch with you?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. So my company is Evolution Coaching and Consulting, LLC. So my website is evolutioncc.org. And my email is simple. It's Gerry with a G, Gerry at evolutioncc.org.
Perfect. And for those who are listening, I will make that really simple for you and drop that in the show notes and link it so you can just go down there and click on it and connect with Gerry. I follow him on LinkedIn and I see that he's at Seton Hall, different places, working in corporations and colleges all over the place. And you can already tell that I'm saying, yes, this is so much needed. I'm sure many of you right now are thinking the different ways this could uniquely fit into the place that you work or your students, so many different ways where this is important. So thank you, Gerry, for sharing all of that. We're going to jump to the last question that I ask all of my guests here. I'm really curious to hear what you have to say here. If you were the main character in a movie called The Champion Within, and we have the screen go to black, we're on a cliffhanger, what is the audience screaming, yelling for you to do next? They then go to social media and start writing, this is what we hope happens, all the hashtags, all the things. What do you think is on their minds?
Wow, there's a lot to unpack in that question. So I'm in a movie and we're at the final scene. Is that what the question was?
Right, we're left on a cliffhanger and it goes to the black screen. We're left to edge of our seats wondering what's he going to do next.
So I think if it was a movie, I wouldn't be the main character, right? I think I would be the supporting character working with the main character. So if I go back to my coaching and what I do. So I don't know what the plot of the movie or the theme of the movie would be, but as we get to the end, obviously the main character will be sort of in this moment of success, and the support that I've given them would have led to what they wanted to do. And I guess as they're sort of standing triumphant, they would turn to me and go, what do I do now? And I would maybe just sort of look at them and smile and go, I've got an idea. And then it fades to black, and we just set up the sequel because the sequel will be the idea.
Love
but
it.
Look, that's what I try to do. I try to help my clients be a little bit better tomorrow than today. So that's probably where I'd want to end, on that cliffhanger of, I know how we're going to get a little bit better. Stay tuned.
I love that. I really think that embodies everything you've been talking about, the guide on the side with them saying, listen, you can get there. And that excited feeling of where are we going to go next? How are we going to be better tomorrow? I really think that's exciting. So I'm excited for you and people.
I read an article with Kevin Bacon, who's one of my favorite actors, and he had a mid-career strategy change, right? Because he said he was going for leading roles, but he was competing with a lot of the other big names in Hollywood. And so what he started to do was to look for great supporting roles. So that's where I was thinking about that when you asked the movie question. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to be the main guy. I'm going to go the Kevin Bacon route and be like a great supporting role. But it does work well because that's kind of what I do.
I really love it. It's really cool. And that is the first time anyone has said that. It's a very cool answer. Thank you for that. And thank you for all of the wisdom that you've shared today. And for everyone who's listening, I hope you uniquely put this into your life because it is incredibly important. And you don't have to do all of the things. We talked about how there's so many different skills, and Gerry had mentioned it's hard to pick one that's most important, but think about starting with one. You don't have to do all the things. Is there anything else you want to tell them? One last thing you want to leave them with, Gerry? I know we talked about so many things before we go.
You know what? I mean, seek someone who will give you that honest feedback, right? We all have the friends that tell us we're great, and those are important people in our lives, but you got to go to somebody that will say, you know what you're not so great at is X, and I think you need to spend some time on that and be open to that feedback. And then, Kate, I love your point. Work on one thing at a time, right? I mean, there's multiple lists of soft skills, but they're anywhere between 10 and 15 that are kind of critical. You can't work on all of them at one time, but figure out the ones where you can make some progress and take those on. Love that advice.
Love it. And you're right. We go to people that we know the answer they're going to give us. So if you really want to improve and see growth, go to someone who's going to give you that honest feedback. What a great way to end this episode. Thank you so much, Gerry, for spending time with me and my listeners. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, Kate, congrats on your great work as well. And thanks for having me. I had a great time. I really appreciate it.
You are very welcome. All right, champions, thank you again for hanging out with us on The Champion Within, and have an amazing rest of your week. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for hanging out with Kate today. And whether you're going to coach, teach, cheer from the sidelines, or hitting the field yourself, remember, mindset is everything. Don't forget to follow the show for the latest episodes, as we all need a little extra motivation, humor, and sanity in our busy lives. Now, go and unleash your champion within you, one step at a time. We're always rooting for you.